staff, I would like to welcome you to the October 25th, 2022 City of Roseville Public Utilities Commission meeting. This 7-member commission is responsible for studying and advising the City Council regarding all utilities owned or operated by the city, including electric, water, wastewater, and solid waste. The Public Utilities Commission advises the City Council regarding planning, rates, public information, cable television franchises, and other matters related to such enterprises, and may also hear citizen complaints as to the operation or rates. The Public Utilities Commission also advises the City Council regarding the activities of such joint power agencies as the city may be a member of or which relate to such utility enterprises. At this time, I would like to ask everyone, please put your electronic devices on silent. All right, next item is roll call. Commissioner Maish has notified us that he will be absent this evening. Pam, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Commissioner Bilski?
Here.
Commissioner DeLacy?
Here.
Commissioner DeMarkey?
Here.
Commissioner Granger?
Here.
Commissioner Maish is absent. Commissioner Webb?
Here.
And Chair Knox.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner DeLacy, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next up, item 4 on the agenda is public comments. This item is for anyone who would like to address the commission on any item that is not on tonight's agenda. When addressing the commission, please state your first and last name for the record. All right, no public comments. Next up, approval of minutes. The next item on the agenda is approval of the September 27, 2022 meeting minutes. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd like to move that we approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? All right. Next up, requests and presentation. Next on the agenda is requests and presentations. Item 6.1, Electric Utilities Monthly Update. Report by Environmental Utilities Assistant Director Sean Bigley, summarizing the monthly status of environmental utilities activities for information.
Well, good evening, Chair Knox and members of the PUC. So my name is Sean Bigley. I'm an Assistant Environmental Utilities Director. It's good to be here tonight. And I'd like to provide the Director's Report for this meeting tonight. So I have a few updates. I'll try to be quick. First is I just want to let the Commission know that the Pleasant Grove Wastewater Treatment Plant, the commissioning process is now underway. It actually started a couple weeks ago. And so it's a very sort of specific process as you bring these plants online. And essentially, we're about ready to start seeding the anaerobic digester. We started off with the primary processes, and we'll kind of go through the various steps of that process to get the plant ultimately online through all the improvements to the expansion. And then as we start to complete the commissioning process, this will actually address a lot of the odor issues that have been experienced at the Pleasant Grove treatment plant. So big achievement and a lot of hard work by our operations staff and other folks to get through this process. So just wanted to provide an update in that area. The next thing is a little bit lengthier. I just wanted to kind of give you an update in terms of what we're seeing in terms of both the impacts of inflation, but also the supply chain issues. And these are really specific to some of the projects that we've been working on. So really what I'll go through tonight is really just talk about sort of the confluence between both material costs and supply chain disruptions and kind of how that's affected both the costs of projects, but also how we complete these projects going forward. And it's really created conditions that are difficult to deal with, but we've also tried to be very creative in terms of how we try to navigate through those issues. So I'll give you a couple examples. So for the first is our Pleasant Grove Wastewater Treatment Plant expansion project. In terms of costs, we just want to give you some specific examples, and there's a whole list of different things that are out there. So one of the big areas that we've seen costs increase for are related to wire. And so just to give you a comparison here, so when the project was bid in July 2019, and moving forward to August of 2021 as an example, one is a feeder size 500, sorry for the lingo here. The cost started at $6.02 per linear foot, and it's increased up to $11.46 per linear foot. So you can imagine that adds up. There's some other examples here as well. In this particular case, it actually added an increase in price for the project itself, or cost for the project, of about $208,000, just that one example by itself. And generally speaking, the information provided by our engineers, they're looking at a report recently that suggests that material costs on average are increasing about 31.5% over the previous year. So some fairly significant cost increases relative to that project and materials used. I'll also talk a little bit about our ASR groundwater well projects. We have 2 underway in West Roseville. We're very, very close to completing those projects, but we have encountered some issues relative to some parts that are needed to bring those projects online. So the big thing that's been a challenge is really the lead time related to some of the electrical components. There's a few examples that our engineers have provided here. Motor control centers, they're now being quoted with lead times of 52 weeks. That's been a significant increase in terms of lead times on those components. Electrical breakers that have high amperage, or called smart breakers, oftentimes they include chips in those products, are quoting 80 weeks out, and in some cases, vendors are not even willing to provide estimated delivery dates. So very difficult in terms of procurement. Another example is variable frequency drives. They took actually over a year for several to be delivered for several of our projects. And we have other things like smaller components like copper electrical wire, which I just indicated, switches, and other things that have been difficult to source. And then, staff has been pretty creative. They've had to really kind of scour the earth, if you will, trying to look for different vendor sources for these materials. And again, they've had to be very creative in terms of how they look for those materials and kind of work within our processes within the city of Roseville. Other products that they've indicated that have been difficult, anything that has steel has been difficult to acquire. Examples being stainless steel pumps and motors. Metal roofing has been difficult to acquire as well. Oils and AC pavement have been difficult to procure, as well as cement and concrete products. Specifically in our wells, we use CMU blocks basically to provide security for those facilities, and those have been difficult to acquire as well. Costs of lumber, I think most people have heard lumber has gone up pretty significantly. And even we're finding things like some of the tools that are used to construct these projects are actually difficult and expensive to acquire. So we recently heard from one of the contractors that is working on our ASR wells. They actually attended a conference recently where there was a national construction, it's a national construction conference where an accounting firm that deals with construction projects has indicated that they expect projects in general to be about 16% more costly this year. And so again, obviously price is going to be a huge impact on sort of the projects, but I think the bigger challenge has been just sort of the supply chain delivery issues. It's made projects difficult to deliver based on the schedules that we've laid out. So that's just an update. We'll definitely be keeping PC updated on other sort of aspects of the operation. Water and wastewater are only two pieces of a much bigger department. So we'll have some other examples to share in future PUC meetings and keep you posted on that area. And finally, on a more upbeat note, just want to indicate that EU is a finalist for 3 awards at this week's Public Relations Society of America's Capital Chapter Influence Awards. And these are really for several projects. First is our Barton Road Water Treatment Plant 50th anniversary. Many of you attended that event, so that's up for award. WaterWise Wilma, which is a water efficiency campaign that we use to encourage water efficiency through social media. And then a video that was created that basically localizes the National Fix a Leak Awareness Campaign, which is an annual campaign that goes on every year. So with that, those are the updates for environmental utilities, and I will see if anybody has any questions.
Do any commissioners have questions for the staff at this time?
Just a comment, maybe. I work with a lot of different motor suppliers, and it's everywhere. The supply chain problems are real.
Yeah.
And it's not uncommon to see deliveries on big motors 10 months, 12 months, 1 year, over a year.
Right. Yep.
It's not easy.
Yep.
And the prices just keep going, jacking up.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? All right. Thank you for the update, Sean.
Thank you.
All right, next up is item 6.2, Environmental Utilities Legislative and Regulatory Update. Presentation by Utility Government Relations Administrator Noel Maddock, providing a year-end overview of priority water, wastewater, recycled water, and waste services related legislation and regulatory issues addressed in 2022. For information.
Great. Good evening, Chair Knox and Commissioners. Tonight, I plan to cover bills that were signed into law by the governor and key legislation that was vetoed. Additionally, I will provide a brief overview of 2 provisions of the Inflation Reduction Act that could potentially be a benefit to environmental utilities. But first, I would like to provide an overview of the outcomes from this year. At Environmental Utilities, we identified just over 200 bills that could have an impact on the operations of the water, wastewater, recycled water, refuse, and stormwater divisions. Out of that 200, there were 25 high-priority bills that we took positions on and actively worked on. Of those 25 bills, we supported 9 bills that made it to the governor's desk, of which 8 became law and 1 was vetoed. We opposed 3 bills that made it to the governor's desk, and 2 became law, but 1 was vetoed. So a pretty good outcome from our perspective. And through the legislative process, we were able to move to a neutral position on 4 bills, 3 of which became law and 1 was vetoed. Next, I'll cover new laws that we worked on. The first one is AB 2374, which Roseville supported to help address illegal dumping within our city. The bill increases the maximum allowable fine for convictions of illegal dumping. The new maximum fines are $5,000 for a first conviction, $10,000 for a second, and $20,000 for a third conviction. Additionally, for anybody that is convicted of the illegal dumping, they now will have 2 options of either cleaning up their dump site themselves, or they will have to pay the cost for cleaning up that site. The next 2 measures that I will be discussing deal with loose and embedded batteries, which are very much a part of our everyday. In combination, these 2 bills overhaul the state's existing battery extended producer responsibility programs and expands the state's e-waste program. The first measure, AB 2440, sunsets 2 existing programs, the Cell Phone Recycling Act and the Rechargeable Battery Act, and creates a single EPR program for batteries within the state. The covered batteries include any loose batteries that are sold separate, batteries that are designed to be easily removed from a product that you purchase with just common household tools, and then batteries that typically come with your product but aren't actually installed in the product. SB 1215 is dealing with the embedded products and expands the current Electronic Waste Recycling Act of 2003 to include those embedded products. It now will cover video display devices with a screen of 4 inches or larger. And then, of course, on the converse side of 2440, it covers the embedded batteries that were not designed to be easily removed with a household tool. The next bills deal with per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. There are actually thousands of chemicals in this group of substances referred to as PFAS. There's actually an increasing attention on these chemicals because they do not break down in the down, and that's leading them to be called forever chemicals. The water, wastewater, and refuse utilities are really the passive receivers of the products and these actual chemicals in their processes, and are often relied upon for the treatment and removal of them from the environment, which ultimately impacts the affordability of our rates. Roseville is supportive of measures that help to address the use of these forever chemicals and places the responsibility on the manufacturers. These 3 bills that were approved actually prohibit the use of these intentionally added PFAS substances in juvenile products, textiles, and cosmetic and other beauty products, respectively. The last 2 new laws that I'll be covering deal with water conservation. The first one is AB 2142, which reinstates the tax-exempt status of turf rebates that sunset in 2019. This exemption covers personal and corporate taxable income from 2021 to 2026. And lastly, the bill SB 1157 is one of the laws that we actually opposed but was approved by the governor. In 2018, 2 bills, AB 1668 and SB 606, became law, which combined, they created a new urban water use objective for each water agency. I refer to it as a water budget. A water agency's budget will be comprised of the following components: the aggregate residential indoor use, plus the aggregate residential outdoor use, plus an aggregate commercial, industrial, institutional use, plus water loss. If an agency does not meet their budget, it can actually result in fines to the water agency. Beginning in 2024, we will calculate our indoor water use target using 50 gallons per person daily. And then with the passage of SB 1157, we will end up having to use 47 gallons per person daily beginning in 2025, and then that will ratchet down to 42 in 2030. There was actually supposed to be flexibility within this formula on how an agency was supposed to meet their budget, but what we've been seeing is they're really pulling the lever on each one of those elements, and it's making it very difficult for a water agency to actually meet their budgets. Working through our statewide associations, Roseville was able to successfully get a study on teleworking inserted into SB 1157, which in turn could result in a variance process to address the shift we have seen towards remote and hybrid working environments. The next 2 bills I will cover are ones that the governor actually vetoed. The first one is AB 2247. This bill was sponsored by the California Association of Sanitation Agencies to tackle the biggest hurdle in addressing PFAS, which is the lack of information about the products that actually contain it. The first step to making good policy and regulatory decisions on addressing the use of PFAS is understanding how they're actually being used. Through the process, we learned that PFAS was actually used in making artificial hearts and other medical devices. So that was kind of eye-opening to learn that during the process. Roseville supported 2247 because it would have created a database for manufacturers to register their products that contain intentionally added PFAS. The last bill I'll cover at the state level is SB 222, which Roseville actually was opposed to. At the end of 2021 legislative session, Roseville actually was in support of this bill because it would have created a statewide low-income water rate assistance program. Unfortunately, during the last 2 months of this session this year, the author and sponsors amended the bill in ways that caused us to move to an opposed position. Our concerns centered around potential Proposition 218 issues as it proposed to have water agencies qualify and enroll people into the state's program without covering the full costs of an agency to perform the work on their behalf. Roseville, along with our associations, urged them to mirror the program after the temporary low-income household water and wastewater arrearages payment program that's currently helping low-income eligible households eliminate arrearages. The governor vetoed this bill, citing lower than expected state revenues, as well as there was no ongoing funding identified for the measure. Finally, on the federal front, there are 2 provisions within the Inflation Reduction Act that I would like to cover. The first provision would allow for direct payments to local governments towards biogas projects of less than 1 megawatt. There is a limitation of this funding as projects would need to begin construction by December 31st of 2024. In review, currently, Environmental Utilities does not have a project in the queue to meet this deadline. However, should Congress decide to extend this funding, as they generally do, it could be potential funding, a funding source in the future. The act also included $4 billion for drought relief, but it is aimed at addressing issues in Colorado River Basin states, which does include California. However, it's likely to go to Southern California because they are direct users of Colorado River water. But given this carve-out specifically for that basin, it could mean that Roseville would be more competitive in other funding opportunities. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Do any commissioners have questions for staff at this time?
I do. Going back to SB 1157, how is this water usage calculated? What does it include?
So that's that goes to that formula. It is the aggregate of the indoor water use, the aggregate of residential outdoor water use, CII, and then water loss. All of those will be calculated based upon regulations, and on the indoor standard, it was set legislatively. But right now, the State Water Board is in the process of approving the regulations for the other elements. They just adopted the water loss regulation.
So this includes showers, toilets, dishwashers, everything?
Yes, it will.
What's the current usage? You mentioned the target usage. The target's 47 in 2025 and 42 in 2030. What's the current usage?
So the best calculation that we've had to identify what Roseville's use is happened during the 2015 drought, which at that point we were down to, and Sean can correct me, I think it was about 55 or 57 GPCD per person.
Now,
Well,
So
okay.
how do swimming pools factor in? Because every other house has a swimming pool in Roseville, just about, and swimming pools evaporate, and they all have an autofill feature. So how is that a significant amount of water usage, or am I?
I can't cite any studies, but I can say anecdotally, I have heard that a pool actually uses less water
Right.
than a lawn uses.
Good to know. So I'm thinking all the ones have like water features. My neighbors have a waterfall that comes all the way down the side of their hillside. I'm thinking
But it-
that's got to lose water.
But it recycles.
It does. Yeah, that's true.
It recycles. I happen to have a pool and it has a water feature as well. I don't have any additional evaporation other than a normal pool has.
And I'm assuming if residents go over this usage, there will be fines attached to it.
So it is not based upon an individual household use. What's looked at is our budget, so the water utilities budget that we receive, and the agency is the entity that would be fined, not an individual homeowner.
Although I imagine they'd be probably warned or advised, hey, your usage is a little high, can you,
Absolutely, yes.
You know, currently we get those usage letters periodically, and they say you use more or less than comparable households. A little bit of a shaming letter as well, because they're you know like smart or something households. But what's curious to me, I've often thought, well, if I'm using less, why don't I get why not a rebate? I mean, why wouldn't that not conserve water? I guess what's always concerned me about like the subsidizing the low income, if there's no conservation element in there, so if they've got, I better not speak out of turn. Let's just say they're excessive water users for whatever reason. They hose down their driveway or they take 4 or 5 showers a day. There's no incentive that way. And my thought was, instead of doing these shaming letters periodically, why not say, okay, you saved X amount, or you use less than so much water than your comparable neighbor, why not give them a rebate, a dollar amount rebate, or a penny amount rebate or something? I know I'm being off the charts here, but anyway.
And I would leave this for Joe to potentially step in, but we have to follow Prop 218 and Prop 26. And I think potentially there may be issues with that, but our legal counsel would be best to probably answer that question.
And the other thing I've often wondered, instead of spending all that postage and color paper periodically, why not just include that in the utility bill, in your monthly utility bill?
Isn't that electricity?
No, it's water as well.
Water ones?
Yeah, if I can address that specific point. So we actually used to send those letters. We actually had a service that helped us calculate those letters. And so, Commissioner, the reaction that you got in terms of comparing one neighbor against another really didn't really serve the purpose. It actually aggravated customers to a certain extent. So it really didn't serve the purpose of what we were trying to get, which was really to encourage water efficient behavior. So we actually discontinued doing that. Now, I can't speak. There might be other, I don't know, if, other utilities, PG&E or whatever for gas or whatever that might be doing that. But right now, the water utility has discontinued that service. So that was a while back. So.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Is there anyone from the public that would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? All right. Thank you, Noel.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, item 6.3, Roseville Electric Utility Monthly Update. Report by Electric Utility Director Dan Bean summarizing the monthly status of electric utility activities for information.
Good evening, Chair Knox, Commissioners. So this is a super brief report, but I will add a comment about the shaming letters. These are very popular. So first of all, I just want to give you a quick update on supply chain. As Sean mentioned, it's a pain. Transformers has been our biggest issue. We have been receiving some transformers that we ordered over a year ago, and so that's been good. I think the last few that we ordered last year are in production. So far, so good. As far as I know, we've not stopped anything or held up anything. There's nobody in the queue waiting for one, but we're just now getting the ones that have been paid for by developers and being able to get those out to them. So that's good. Things are slowly coming in, but it's still, the transformer issue isn't going to get better long term until we get steel being manufactured in America, transformers manufactured in America. We have to get all that to really solve this future problem, because electric vehicles are going to compete with that steel, and it's just going to get worse. So that's the negative side. And the other update is the energy surcharge. We're going to have that first reading with City Council on November 16th. So that's coming up. And then on the shame letters, we have a 10-year energy efficiency plan that we have to give to the California Energy Commission. And amazingly enough, paying the postage, sending these letters out is the most cost-effective way we can meet that requirement. And if we can come up with a clever way to meet those kind of requirements with less cost and less annoyance to our customers, we will happily do that. But right now, this is what we got. So apologize for that. I'll take any questions.
Do any commissioners have questions for the staff at this time? Can you get me a sign that says "I conserve" instead of the letter?
Right. With the mess in Florida, of course, they've lost just thousands of transformers. Can you be outvoted or lose your hold on transformers? I would guess you could.
Absolutely, yeah. Our manufacturer is actually over in that neck of the woods, so if there's a need, you can be sure they'll get diverted to the utilities
And that could affect building here.
Yeah, they will. Yeah.
There's no way to stockpile transformers, I take it. You can't just like stock up on them.
Well, we usually stay a year ahead, but when your supply chain lead times go from 3 months to 3 years, or with no guarantee, yeah. So we are stocking. We will start stocking them up once we start getting them, and we have over 600 on order, and we're trying to get them from South Korea. We're trying to if we can find them, we're going to get them, but. Yeah, and we will stockpile as much as we can. We actually set aside some more of our corp yard to be able to lay down and store more transformers once we start getting them.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? All right, thanks, Dan, for the update.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda, item 6.4, Electric AMI Meter Opt-Out Proposal Overview, presentation by Interim Assistant Electric Director Eric Campbell and Interim Electric Utility Financial Administrator Trancucci with an overview of the AMI Meter Opt-Out Proposal. This item is for recommendation.
Good evening, Chairman Knox, Commissioners. Eric Campbell, Roseville Electric. Just to set the stage before Joanna gets into the presentation, this is our AMI meter opt-out proposal. This is for customers that do not want that technology on their homes, and there's a variety of reasons out there of why. Some customers have data concerns, others have general health concerns about the wireless technology. What we are proposing is in alignment with other jurisdictions that have gone through similar implementations, so it's not unique to Roseville. We do expect to have a certain population elect this opt-out rate, probably in the 50 to 100 range in terms of customers. And we do need to get this rate in place now in advance of putting together the collateral and communications that are going to go out to customers early next year as we get into the beta phase of the project, where we're going to actually put meters in the field beginning in Q1 of next year. I believe there's going to be 750 electric meters and then another 750 water meters. And so we do need to get this rate in place in advance of those materials being put together. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joanna to get into the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. So we're here to present the Advanced Metering Infrastructure Residential Opt-out Policy and Rates. This is only for the electric meters. There's not going to be an opt-out option for water meters. That's typically because electric meters are on the house and water meters tend to be further away from the house. So this, again, while there are going to be advanced meters for water and electric, this would only apply to the electric side. So as Eric said, we will begin installing advanced meters in early 2023. And then once the beta testing phase is complete, we want to have this opt-out policy in place for some of our residential customers. This won't be available to all customers, and I'll go through the limitations on that a little further on. As Eric mentioned, we don't expect a large number of opt-out customers. The typical amount of opt-out that other utilities in our area have seen is 0.5%. So it is a small number of customers, but all utilities do offer this as an option, and so we are just continuing that trend and offering this to our customers who do choose to opt out of the technology. In terms of eligibility, the opt-out option is only for residential customers and only for single-family, duplex, townhome customers where the meter is attached to the premise. So the customers that are not eligible are our net energy metering customers. These are our solar NEM customers where the meter rolls forwards and backwards. It doesn't work for the opt-out meters to have that. So anyone who's on the net metering rate is not going to be eligible. Customers who have a history with meter tampering or unauthorized use of energy are not going to be eligible for this rate. And then multifamily customers where there's a bank of meters in one spot, those customers are also not eligible for this rate. So there's two portions of how the opt-out works. There's a one-time fee, and so a customer choosing to opt out of AMI metering will be charged a one-time fee of $119. And then for customers that are participating in our low-income programs, so our low-income medical and senior programs, the cost of opting out, the one-time fee would be $59.50. This fee is there to recover the costs that the utility incurs to replace the advanced meter with a non-communicating meter. So that includes the meter itself and then the labor needed to install the meter. And then in addition to the one-time fee, there's a monthly fixed rate. And so customers who opt out will be charged a monthly fixed rate of $15 for single-family customers. And then for low-income single-family customers that qualify, it would be $750. And then this fixed rate covers the additional operating costs of serving those customers on a monthly basis. So these costs would include things like meter reading, vehicle costs, and meter maintenance that's going to require a tech in the field to fix things. So looking at utilities in California that have adopted an opt-out fee and rate, we're in line with SMUD in terms of the one-time fee. We're proposing, again, $119. SMUD's at $127. All the utilities that are at 75 are truly just copying PG&E. So as you can see, it's 75 and 10. That's just adopted by the CEC, and most of the utilities copied that. However, when we did our calculations, that wasn't going to recover the cost of serving these opt-out customers, which is why we didn't follow down that path. We did an individual calculation on the exact cost that it was going to cost utility and our customers for this service. So again, our one-time fee, based on that calculation, is $119, and our monthly fee is $15. One thing that we are providing our customers that most of the other utilities aren't is we're reading monthly instead of bi-monthly, so they will get real bills every month instead of an estimated bill followed by a true-up bill. So based on all that, our recommendation, our request to you guys is to recommend adoption of a one-time fee for advanced meter opt-out for qualifying customers for costs related to the purchase and installation of a non-communicating meter, and recommend adoption of a monthly fixed rate for the ongoing costs of manually reading and maintaining non-communicating meters for the opt-out customers. And we'll happily answer any questions.
Do any commissioners have questions for the staff at this time?
When you say manually reading, is there, I didn't know there was anybody walking around reading them still there, is there?
Yeah, we do have meter readers that are out in the field every day.
Oh, yeah.
All right, is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? All right, we will close public comment. I would ask for a motion to recommend this item be presented to City Council. Do I have a
I'll
motion?
make that motion.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions?
Motion passes.
The recommendation has passed and approved to be presented to council. Thank you, Eric and Joanna. Sorry. Item 6.5, electric legislation and regulatory update. Presentation by Utility Government Relations Administrator Amber Blix, providing a year-end overview of priority energy-related legislation and regulatory issues addressed in 2022 for information.
Good evening, Chair Knox and Commissioners. Now that the legislative session is over, we thought we'd give you a brief legislative update and regulatory update on some of the things that we are tracking this year. So first, we'll talk about some of our legislative and regulatory advocacy efforts just generally, and then we'll delve into the new laws, a few of the new laws that we were tracking that impact the department, and then a couple of the bills that failed passage, and then we'll touch upon the federal legislation, H.R. 5376, the Inflation Reduction Act. So just a reminder of the advocacy efforts of the department. Legislative and regulatory advocacy is a priority for the city and the department, and we have a legislative platform that we develop annually that kind of guides our advocacy efforts. This year, we tracked over 160 state and federal bills in the electric department, and we have dedicated resources, including staff and lobbyists, to ensure that our interests are covered at both the state and the federal level. And we also work closely with our trade associations to shape legislation, and that includes the California Municipal Utilities Association, the Northern California Power Agency, and the American Public Power Association. So the first bill I wanted to talk about was a big one that was passed as a budget trailer bill just before the legislature left for summer recess. And it was really looking at reliability resources for the summer. And a few of the issues that are relevant to the department include a reliability report that the CEC will conclude at the beginning of next year that will focus on how utilities, and specifically to us, publicly owned utilities, manage summer reliability during 2022. So that's something that we'll be looking at for the beginning of next year. The bill also established the Distributed Electricity Backup Assets Program, and this is, I think of it more of a kind of a supply side on asset program, and this is to incentivize clean distributed energy assets for on-call emergency supply. This bill also created the Demand Side Grid Support Program, and this is to incentivize customer load reduction and backup generation for on-call emergency supply and load reduction. And then the bill also created the Electricity Supply Strategic Reliability Reserve and agreements. And this allows the Department of Water Resources to construct, own, operate, or contract for summer reliability resources. And this is all kind of in emergency situations to gather additional supply and demand resources when the grid is under stress. And it will also have the Energy Commission look at a long-duration energy storage program to provide incentives for those resources. So it really set up a lot of opportunities for reliability resources throughout the state, and this is something that we're going to be tracking closely at the regulatory level to see what additional opportunities may be available to Roseville. Another bill that we'll be tracking going forward as part of the regulatory process is AB 1279, and this was part of the governor's 5-pillar climate plan that establishes net zero greenhouse gas emissions no later than 2045. This was previously an executive order. This bill codified it into law. And it also ensures that 2045 anthropogenic, or otherwise known as man-made GHG emissions, are at least 85% below 1990 levels. And then this will all be included in the state scoping plan. So going forward, as utilities, we'll have to kind of factor in these new targets into our future planning efforts in the long term. Another bill, SB 1020, you guys have, I'm sure, repeatedly heard about the state's Renewable Portfolio Standard Program. Currently, our targets are 60% renewable energy by 2030 and 100% renewable energy and zero carbon by 2045. This bill establishes interim targets for the out years, so you can see that 90% of all retail sales of electricity need to occur by December of 2035, 95% by 2040, and 100% by 2045. It also ups the state agency procurement by 10 years. Currently, it's 2045 goal for 100% of electricity procured to serve all state agencies. Under this bill, it'll be by 2035. They are looking at how this is going to affect reliability, so they'll have a report on that will come out by the end of next year. We're obviously watching this bill to look at how this may impact rates in the future, and then also how this may affect flexibility in the out years. But I will say that the RPS is usually amended on within an 18-month period, so we think that we'll likely readdress this legislation going forward in the years to come. SB 1158, this is a bill that would require every retail supplier to annually report each hour of electricity used to serve load and the associated GHG emissions starting in January of 2028. The Energy Commission, the CEC, will adopt rules to implement these requirements by July 1st of 2024, and then they will publish the utilities data, the data that's reported by all retail sellers on their website. Also requires our governing board to review these annual emissions and to assess our progress towards our GHG emission reductions. As you can see, this requires us to report on each hour of electricity that we procure. So this is going to be very burdensome reporting requirements. And it was a bill that we did oppose throughout the session, but unfortunately it made it through. So this is the one thing that is kind of the light at the end of the tunnel for us is that we do have a few years before this regulation comes out. And then we also don't have to start this until 2028. So we have some time to kind of plan. A couple of bills that we opposed that did fail in the legislature this year. The first was AB 2133. This would have required us to reduce GHG emissions at least 55% below 1990 levels by 2030. The current target is 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. We thought that these more aggressive targets would be problematic, especially as the state is moving to more electrification. So we weren't willing to move to those more aggressive targets at this point, which is why we opposed the bill. And then also SB 1391 on cap and trade program review every 3 years. This bill assumed that there's a problem with the cap and trade and wanted to address any allowance over allocation. We as utilities receive allowances, and so we were concerned that this may kind of mess up that current structure that's in place now. So luckily both of these bills failed passage. And then a big piece of the federal legislation, H.R. 5376, the Inflation Reduction Act. This bill, I'll talk just specifically about the energy and climate change related investments, which total $369 billion. And this bill really created a roadmap for incentives, grants, and loans to achieve the climate objectives, and it didn't really focus too much on specific mandates, more incentives. So one that's important to us is the concept of direct pay, and this allows tax-exempt utilities to claim energy credits directly for clean energy technologies, which provides tax parity with our industry counterparts and allows publicly owned utilities to use these credits with their own energy generation resources. This does require certain domestic content requirements for these projects, but we're happy that this provision of the bill went through. Also relevant to us is the clean vehicle tax credits. The bill retained the $7,500 clean vehicle tax credit with requiring some final assembly in North America post the time that the bill passed, which was in August. It also allows for a new one-time $4,000 tax credits for used clean vehicles starting in 2023. Previously, used vehicles weren't eligible for the credits. And then beginning in 2024, the credit will be paid directly at the point of sale to reduce the purchase price. So it relieves some of that burden on consumers. A couple of the other components of the bill that were important, more on energy tax credits. It extends the investment tax credit and the production tax credit by 10 years. Historically, these have been tax credits that have been used to support renewable energy technologies like wind and solar. The bill also has additional energy investments, including rebates for installing new electric appliances, tax credits for solar panels, battery storage, equipment upgrades, and then commercial building and small business tax credits as well. So having said all of that, the bill is very lengthy and there's a lot going on in it. And so the Department of Treasury and the IRS are currently requesting comments on implementation. There's over 26 clean energy tax credits included in the bill. So now they're really working on implementation and how to get what's been enacted into the law out to the public. They've created a White House clean energy website that directs consumers to tax and eligibility info, which is there. It's the cleanenergy.gov website. And then we worked on our advocacy, we worked through our trade associations, particularly the American Public Power Association, to support specific components of this bill, most importantly, the direct pay, which was the first bullet on the slide. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Do any commissioners have questions for staff at this time?
I do. You talked about rebates for new electrical appliances, and that applies to consumers as well? This is...
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We don't know how much. I guess as fuel prices go up, it'll be more and more of an incentive as natural gas.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think a lot of that's getting worked out now at the Department of the Treasury and the IRS.
But there's no mandate to convert. There's just an incentive to convert.
Yeah, that's my understanding. And the nice thing about this bill is it's really a lot about incentives, but not direct mandates.
So with the city able to take advantage of some of these tax incentives, is it thought maybe we would do renewable generation on our own rather than buy through PPAs?
I think the direct pay creates the opportunity to have that, whereas before you might have had to do a power purchase agreement, a PPA, for that entity to actually capture the tax credits. Now we could capture those tax credits on our own, so we're not losing that. We're not losing out on that now under the direct pay feature. But I think a lot of, just like all the other incentives, a lot of that still has to be delineated in how the IRS is going to operate with those, how they're going to implement that into the law. Yeah.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to come forward and address the commission on this item? All right, thank you, Amber, for the update.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is board members, commissioner, or staff reports. Are there any reports from staff? Question or comments from commission? Does anyone have any items that they would like to suggest for future meetings? All right. May I have a motion to adjourn?
Move that we adjourn?
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, we are adjourned.
And you may have this back. It's a nice bill.
Thank you.